On the southern coast of the Caribbean island of Jamaica lies one of the great cities of the Americas, a city of music, of history, of struggle and triumph that rose, quite literally, from the ruins of one of the most notorious catastrophes in the history of the New World. It is a city born from an earthquake, built by the survivors of a sunken pirate haven, shaped by the brutal history of sugar and slavery, forged into the capital of a nation, and destined to give the world one of the most influential musical cultures on the planet. Its name is Kingston. And its story is, in many ways, the story of the Caribbean itself, of conquest and slavery, and resistance and freedom, of disaster and rebirth, of suffering and of extraordinary cultural creativity. Today, we are going to tell the entire history of Kingston, the capital of Jamaica, how it was born from the destruction of a wicked city, how it grew on the wealth of sugar and the suffering of the enslaved, how it became the heart of a free nation, and how it gave the world a sound that would change music forever. Using advanced AI trained on the historical records of Jamaica and the Caribbean, the archaeology of the region, the accounts of the great earthquake and the rise of the city, and the cultural history of this remarkable place, we have reconstructed the history of Kingston. It begins, dramatically, with a city that was not Kingston at all, but its wicked and doomed predecessor across the bay. Before Kingston, there was Port Royal. In the 17th century, on the tip of a long spit of land guarding a magnificent natural harbour on Jamaica's southern coast, stood the town of Port Royal, and it had a fearsome reputation. Jamaica had been seized by the English from the Spanish, and Port Royal became a base for privateers and pirates, the buccaneers of the Caribbean, who preyed on Spanish shipping and treasure, and who brought their plunder back to the town to spend it. Port Royal grew fabulously wealthy and fabulously wicked. It became one of the richest and most notorious towns in the Americas, packed with taverns, gambling dens, and brothels, awash in stolen Spanish gold, a haven of pirates and merchants and every kind of vice, earning a reputation as one of the most sinful cities on earth. And then, in the year 1692, catastrophe struck. A massive earthquake hit Port Royal. The ground beneath much of the town, which was built on unstable sand, turned to liquid in the violent shaking, and a large part of the wicked city slid into the sea and sank beneath the harbour, drowning thousands of people in a matter of minutes. To many of the pious of the age, it seemed like nothing less than the judgment of God upon the most sinful city in the world. The sunken ruins of Port Royal still lie beneath the harbour today, a drowned pirate city explored by underwater archaeologists. And from this catastrophe, Kingston was born. The survivors of the Port Royal earthquake needed a new place to live, and they established a new settlement across the harbour, on the mainland, on more solid ground, laid out in an orderly grid of streets. This new town was named Kingston, and it grew steadily as Port Royal declined, taking over its trade and its role as the commercial heart of the island. Kingston's superb natural harbour, one of the finest in the Caribbean, made it an ideal centre for trade and shipping, and the town prospered. But the prosperity of Kingston, and of all Jamaica, was built on one of the darkest foundations in human history: sugar and slavery. For Jamaica had become one of the most valuable sugar-producing colonies in the world, and the sugar plantations were worked by enslaved Africans, brought across the Atlantic in their hundreds of thousands in the horrific conditions of the slave trade, to labour and die in the brutal work of producing the sugar that made the plantation owners and merchants rich. Kingston became one of the major ports of this terrible commerce, a centre for the trade in both sugar and enslaved human beings. The wealth of the city, like the wealth of so much of the Caribbean, was inseparable from the suffering of the enslaved. The history of Jamaica, and of Kingston, is therefore also a history of resistance and the struggle for freedom. The enslaved people of Jamaica never accepted their bondage passively. Throughout the island's history under slavery, there was resistance, rebellions and uprisings, and the remarkable communities of the Maroons, people who had escaped slavery and established free, independent settlements in the rugged, mountainous interior of the island, where they defended their freedom fiercely against all attempts to recapture them, eventually winning a measure of recognition of their independence. The struggle against slavery, on the island and through the great abolition movements, eventually led, in the 19th century, to the abolition of slavery throughout the British Empire, and the enslaved people of Jamaica were freed. The legacy of slavery, however, shaped the society of Kingston and Jamaica long afterward, in its deep inequalities and its enduring struggles, but so did the spirit of resistance, resilience, and the fierce determination to be free, which became a central thread in the identity and the culture of the Jamaican people. Kingston continued to grow and to face new challenges across the centuries. In time, it became the official capital of Jamaica, the center of government, commerce, and culture for the whole island. Like its drowned predecessor, Kingston too faced the constant danger of natural disaster, and in the early 20th century the city was struck by another major earthquake, which devastated much of it and required extensive rebuilding, a reminder that this is a city that has had to rise from ruin more than once. Through the 20th century, Kingston grew rapidly into a large modern city as people moved from the countryside to the capital, and it became the bustling, vibrant, sometimes troubled heart of the nation. And in the middle of the 20th century came the great turning point. After centuries as a British colony, Jamaica won its independence, becoming a free and sovereign nation, with Kingston as its proud capital. The long road from a slave colony to an independent black majority nation had reached a historic milestone, and Kingston stood at its center. And it was from the streets of Kingston that Jamaica gave one of its greatest gifts to the entire world: its music. In the neighbourhoods of Kingston, especially the poorer districts where life was hard and struggle was constant, a series of musical revolutions took place that would influence music across the entire planet. Out of the blending of African rhythms, Caribbean traditions, and other influences, Jamaican musicians created a sequence of original musical styles, culminating most famously in reggae, the music that, more than anything else, carried the name and the spirit of Kingston and Jamaica around the world. Reggae, with its distinctive rhythm and its powerful messages of struggle, faith, resistance, love, and liberation, became a global phenomenon, and its greatest artists, who emerged from the streets of Kingston, became international icons whose music and message reached every corner of the globe. The spiritual and cultural movement of Rastafari, which arose in Jamaica and was deeply intertwined with reggae music, also spread its influence and its imagery worldwide. Kingston, the city born from an earthquake and built in the shadow of slavery, became one of the great musical capitals of the world, a place whose cultural influence carried on the power of its music, reached far beyond what its size might suggest, touching and inspiring people on every continent. That was the entire history of Kingston, the capital of Jamaica. A city born from catastrophe, founded by the survivors of the great earthquake that sank the wicked pirate haven of Port Royal beneath the sea. A city that grew rich on the brutal foundations of sugar and slavery, and that was shaped, just as deeply, by the heroic resistance of the enslaved and the long struggle for freedom. A city that became the capital of an island, that rose again from its own earthquakes, that grew into a vibrant modern metropolis, and that became, at last, the proud capital of a free and independent nation, and a city that gave the world one of the most influential and beloved musical cultures on the planet, carrying the spirit of Kingston, its struggle and its resilience and its joy to every corner of the earth. From the drowned ruins of a pirate city to the heart of a free nation, to a sound that changed the world, the story of Kingston is a story of disaster and rebirth, of suffering and resistance, and of the extraordinary power of a people to create beauty and meaning out of the hardest of histories. It rose from an earthquake, and it has been rising, in one way or another, ever since.